talk Cavs, though. We got to get to the Cavs.
Yeah, fifth straight loss last night. 113-98 was the final. Giannis, he was solid, but it wasn't like a typical Giannis game, 16, 12, and 8. But what it did was it opened up a lot of looks for Brooks Lopez, who was just hitting one three-pointer after another.
Explain your team to us, man.
I think he hit 7 of 9
we give you the floor, Jason. Talk that talk.
Are they more the 8-1, or are they more this team that's lost 5 in a row?
They're more. I still think they're a top 3 team in the East. I think it's them, the Celtics, and the Bucks. And listen, last night, so they geared the defense toward trying to stop Giannis.
Right.
Would you take your chances with Giannis at the rim or Brook Lopez shooting threes?
No, they did. That's the right play to play. The way to play it.
And he made shots. So congratulations, you've won an NBA championship. You're one of the best teams in the league, and you did what you're supposed to do. Like I know JB held like a half-hour meeting with the guys after the game last night and was really critical about their fat cats and everything else. I kind of looked at that and was like, man, they made their shots. If you're going to need Brook Lopez to make 7 threes and a dude off the bench, I didn't even know.
I didn't either.
Made 5 off the bench. If that's what you have to do to beat them, okay, I'll live with that because that's not going to happen every time. I didn't mind the way that they guarded Giannis. And I'll tell you what, guys, exactly what I said here on Monday, they may have to come to the point where they start running this through Darius and the ball's in Darius's hands. That's exactly what they did last night. When Darius and Donovan were on the floor together, the ball was in Darius's hands. Donovan initiated when Darius was out of the game, but that was the first game to me where it was kind of clear that they put the ball in Darius's hands and said, okay, run this offense. And no one's going to pay attention to that right now because the defense is such a mess, and it is. They'll get it cleaned up. I'm not at all concerned about this team. This schedule was always going to be difficult, this West Coast trip, and then the one home game, and then right back out to Milwaukee. Now they're home for a few days. They've got winnable games. They've got Charlotte coming in. They've got Miami coming in. They should get well on this homestand. They're going to be fine.
Yeah. So you do think they're closer to the 8-1 than the 5-game losing?
Yeah, I think they're much closer to 8-1.
Well, what do you think?
Than the streak.
I agree with Jason. I think they're much closer to the 8-1 team. I think we're getting worried because they looked so good there for a couple of weeks, as opposed to my hair, which looks terrible. But they look so good, and now they're not playing as well, especially on the defensive end, as Jason alluded to. And so, panic is setting in because we're like, oh, we must have overhyped this team. They're not that good. I think, and Jason, I'm curious your take on this. I think maybe what this stretch has shown is that the Cavs do need a few more depth pieces, right? Because whenever they have injury, like Milwaukee was without 3-4 guys that are really, that are good players. Obviously, Chris Middleton's missed the whole season. He's their second best player. He's missed the whole season, and they're still great, right? They had Connaughton's been out. They had, what's his name, the little white dude from Duke? I can't think of his name.
Grayson Allen. Drew Holiday didn't play yesterday either.
Drew Holiday, that's the
Drew Holiday didn't play. And, the Cavs are missing some of those, depth pieces, which they could probably use, another big man in terms of, a defensive presence with some depth. But in the end, we all knew there were going to be growing pains. We just maybe convinced ourselves they weren't going to happen because they played so great during that 8-game winning streak. And now with injuries and chemistry and learning the chemistry, we're hitting those slumps. But I agree. They're playing, I think, 9 or 10 of their next 13 at home. So they should be able to get right here for the next month.
I actually think they have enough. I would like to see them get someone different at the 3. But depth-wise, I think they're Lamar Stevens has the type of role. He's perfect for that role. When they get Rubio back in January, they need to move Karis LeVert out of the starting lineup. I've said that since the start of the year that I didn't like him.
Let me ask you this, Jason. I think I would start Lamar Stevenson.
Possibly.
I'd look at starting, and I would tell him, because he's a junkyard dog. We talk about that little tenacity.
Talk about wanting to have dogs.
Yeah, that's him. And you tell him, we don't want you to. You ain't got. All you got to do is get layups, and we want you to start off. You're gonna be guarding KD. You're gonna be guarding Giannis. And make him your what's the name? The guy PJ Tucker. He's your PJ Tucker. PJ can hit his side corner 3, but I think about starting Stevenson.
I do think they're probably going to shake up the lineup, and you might be right. That might be one of the plays because I just think LeVert is overkill in that starting lineup. I think if you pull him out, bring him off the bench, give him a little bit more oxygen to operate offensively and break them up a little bit. Maybe it's Okoro at that spot. Maybe it's Wade. But I would get Karis LeVert out of the starting lineup.
Me too. He was right. He was right about that. The Karis LeVert thing, he just doesn't have it's one of them things where he's one of those guys that count down the possessions where he didn't shoot.
Well, he's Amari Cooper in Boom or Bust. Like, he's the Amari Cooper.
Yeah.
He'll give you 41 or he'll give you 2. And you never know which is which. And they don't need 41 out of him most nights.
No.
They don't need that. They need strong defense and make an occasional open shot. But Karas's game is geared more toward having the ball in his hands a little bit. And there's only so many of those guys that you can play together. And we've already seen Darius and Donovan struggle figuring that out. I just think, and it's nothing against Karas. Karas hasn't necessarily done anything wrong. I just think it's overkill to have him in the starting lineup. Bring him off the bench. When Rubio gets healthy, we're probably another 6 weeks or so from seeing Ricky. Put Ricky, Karas, and Kevin Love on that second unit.
Look good.
You've got a lot of depth.
Jetty?
Yeah, I think they're okay on. I'm not a big Jetty fan, but I think that they're fine. If you can go out and you can find another 3, like Brad was mentioning Carmelo the other day, I don't see the harm in bringing him in and taking a look at him. But for the most part, I think that they have what they have and they have what they need, at least for this year.
I'm not panicking. Bull said, there's no reason to panic. I'm not panicking. Especially with last night. I mean, with the lineup that they had to go to war with last night, I didn't think that they were going to beat the Bucks. And you're right. They put the ball in Brook Lopez's hands, and he made the shots.
Okay,
I thought
so
they did a good job defensively against Giannis, and I think most nights you would play it that way.
Right.
Don't give Giannis his 40.
Right.
Keep him to a limited number and make someone else beat you, and that was the formula, and they did it last night. The losses that were particularly concerning to me were the Clippers and the Kings. Those are the games that, as you look back on, and now if you win those 2 games, and they were close in both of them, if you win those 2 games, it's not a 5-game losing streak. You're 2-3 over 5 in a really tough portion of the schedule, and everything's fine. The one thing this team has to do, they have to pile up wins when they're playing teams they should beat.
Yeah. Agreed.
They cannot lose to these teams.
Lost to Minnesota as well.
Exactly.
And they were really undermanned in that game. And Minnesota was in a bad spot. That's a bad spot on the schedule because the schedule loss is a real thing in the NBA. When you're coming off a West Coast trip, the time change and everything else, that first game back at home, you're dragging around cement legs, and it really showed up there. Obviously, I think what this has exposed is Jarrett Allen's importance to this team, which we already knew. We saw that last year. When Jarrett went out with the finger last year and all the time that he missed, their defense unraveled. He's the linchpin, as good as Evan Mobley is. Jarrett Allen is the linchpin to what they do defensively. And then also, I've made this a big talking point for a year and a half, is it's amazing to me how hard they play, how hard this team plays at both ends of the floor. And I don't know that we've seen quite that effort level the last week or so on the defensive end. And now this is what happens. When you don't play as hard as they play on the defensive end, that's when you start giving up 60-point halves. That's when you start needing Darius to try and shoot you back into games, Darius and Donovan to shoot you back into games late in games, and that is not a winning formula for success. So they have to get back to playing hard. They will.
JB called them fat cats and said they, perhaps were reading their own headlines and all of that. I thought that was unfair to say after last night's game. I maybe would have said that after Minnesota or after Sacramento.
He's just trying to get their attention. Like a 4-game losing streak in the NBA, it's a thing. It's a thing.
Yeah.
And I made the joke earlier this morning when LeBron first came back, they lost 4 in a row that first year. It was like the sky was falling and the building was on fire.
Right.
And it's just a different perspective now to lose 4 in a row with a team that.
It's 5, isn't it?
It's 5.
It's 5.
It's 5 in a row.
Yeah,
it's 5 in a row.
Right.
8 and
Last
6
night makes
now.
5. You're right. It's 5 in a row. And that's a thing.
Yeah,
like
it
is.
It's you hope to avoid it.
Sure.
But it happens. It happens to good teams.
I'm not at all worried about them.
Okay,
Not even a little bit.
I think they have to, and this is hard to say because I've only seen a couple of teams play like that. I've seen the Boston Celtics play where they had KG, Paul Pierce, where they just offense was like, all right, the Celtics might not be hitting shots today, but just their suffocating defense every possession just kept them there. Same with the Spurs. The Spurs would be like, in the prime Spurs, they had guys down low. They never had anybody to get you 40 or 50. I mean, they could, but they just played such defense that it was just like, this is crazy. Like, how do we score here? And it's hard for teams to do that because I don't even think 2 or 3 championship teams that literally played that way. I think you could go back and look at the Pistons that play that way a little bit. Mm-hmm. But it's just hard, especially to get young dudes to kind of buy into that. But I don't know, Jason. Is that the identity that they're going to have to hang their hat on? Because if I look around, they're not going to be as firepower ready as some other teams, right? They can score with them, but what I'm looking at, whether it's the Philadelphia 76ers, whether I'm looking at Boston Celtics, whether I'm looking at teams that are at the top of the Milwaukee Bucks,
the Nets even,
they can't. I mean, those guys can score and in a hurry.
Well, I think the Cavs can be that. I mean, Donovan can give you 50 if you need it.
Yep.
Darius has showed you he can give you 50. So they can beat you multiple ways. They can beat you if they're healthy, if they got all their pieces. They can beat you defensively with Jarrett and Evan on the back line defensively. They can beat you by outshooting you and outscoring you. I do think that this team is very versatile and how they can go about attacking teams. I think on any given night, I think they can score with anybody in the league with Donovan and Darius. Once they really figure out how to roll with those guys, and like I said, let's wait and see how it looks going forward. But it was really noticeable to me last night how much they put the ball in Darius's hands offensively and let everything run through him when they were out there together.
All right, well, we've got 15 minutes. You want to pivot to final takes now?